Welcome to the Learning Cosmos podcast. I'm your host, André Hedlund, educational psychologist, author, geek, and nerd. This show brings you science and learning through conversations with stellar people from different fields. Put on your spacesuits and hold tight. Our voyage into the learner's universe begins now. Okay, so welcome everyone to another episode of the Learning Cosmos podcast. And I'm honored today because my guest is Paul Kirschner. So Paul, thank you so much for accepting my invitation.
My pleasure, my pleasure.
Well, yes, and Paul, I've been following your work for some time now. And I want to start with maybe a thought-provoking question. Why science, Let me give you some context. I think we use science for everything. Science is probably the best tool we have as human beings. But for some reason, science has not really reached education in a way. So there are a lot of people promoting fake news and talking about science in a very bad way. And it feels like teachers don't trust science to tell them what to do in the classroom or to help them, not to dictate what they have to do. So why does science matter? And more specifically, why is science important for education?
Now, science brings us further because it teaches us to continually question. And that might be one of the problems, and that's that people who are teaching don't understand that this is the case in science. They think it's a bunch of facts, a bunch of proven things. As soon as you say, there's a nuance, people say, oh, so the old one was wrong, we can't trust science. If you don't know what it is, maybe that gives you a reason not to trust it if you understand. I mean, I was also taught science as if it was a bucket of unchanging truths.
Yeah.
And if you see science as a bucket of unchanging truths and something changes, then you begin to question it. Whereas science is nothing more and nothing less than questioning and trying to bring us further and trying to disprove what we think we know. And hopefully we don't disprove it, and if we do, we should use it to take us further.
Exactly. And it's interesting you mentioned that because science looks at the evidence that is available and, even methodology, different tech that can be used to conduct new experiments. And I feel like that's what makes science so reliable or more reliable, because if there's better evidence, if there's a new method or a new tech that we can use, then why not? And teachers are kind of resilient in the way that they fight against that. So here,
now, scientists have enough problems doing that.
Yes.
I mean, if you look at going over from Newtonian physics to quantum physics,
yeah.
There was at the beginning of the 20th century. It was kind of like hard for some physicists to accept the fact that there was an alternative way of looking at physics.
Yeah.
We always saw light as waves, and all of a sudden we had this idea that light can also be matter.
Yes.
Yeah, which can be bent, which waves couldn't. Those realities can coexist with each other, but sometimes we see that the one just supplants the other because it explains the way the world works better. And
Exactly.
we need to accept that. Yeah, that's about it.
Perfect. Yes. And that brings me to the science of learning. So there is a new inter or transdisciplinary area, we might call it that looks at the contributions of neuroscience, psychology, education, and other fields that are relevant. So can you tell us a little bit, first, what is learning based on those fields? How can we define learning in a scientific way?
I did that in 2006.
Oh, yes.
very simply, and I said, learning is a change in your long-term memory.
Yes.
There's no
Perfect.
change in your long-term memory. You haven't learned anything. You may have
Yeah.
achieved something, you may have gotten a good grade, but you haven't learned anything. So I can't say it more simply or more concretely. Learning is a
Yes.
change in our long-term memory. Period.
Perfect. Yes.
Yeah.
And does that mean, for example, that if I cannot remember something that I was exposed to as a student, let's say many years ago at school, that I haven't learned?
No, you might have learned it,
Yeah.
but through disuse,
Yes.
it's no longer um, on the tip of your tongue.
Yeah.
It's in there somewhere. And if you have to relearn it, it goes a lot quicker than the first time that you learned it. I mean, I give
Precisely.
an example, and it's an anecdote, and I hate anecdotes because they
Yes.
usually say if you have another anecdote, I'll call it data.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
my grandfather was born in Russia and emigrated as a very young child to the United States,
Okay.
and I never knew my grandfather actually as being a Russian.
Yeah.
He didn't speak with an accent except for a Bronx accent, and I never heard him speak Russian. But when he was old and had Parkinson and became
Yeah.
senile, um, he began talking for people around him gibberish.
Ah,
But
okay.
somebody recognized that
He
he
was
was speaking
speaking
Russian
Russian. Yeah.
and he was saying nursery rhymes from
Oh,
when he was a baby,
look
when he
at
was a
that.
child.
Yeah.
And so he couldn't remember it, but he never forgot it.
Yeah. So he had learned it. Yeah.
He had learned it
Yeah.
through
Exactly.
something as simple as repetition. His
Yeah.
mother or his father or his grandmother or his aunt or whoever it was
Yeah.
um, repeated and repeated the nursery rhymes. And I mean, I had never heard my grandfather speak one word of Russian.
Yeah.
Um, uh, for me, it was completely new when I learned that he was born in Russia and had emigrated.
Yeah.
But apparently, though he couldn't remember it, he never forgot it. Now, that's
Yeah.
a good anecdote as what the difference is between remembering and not forgetting.
Definitely. Yes.
Okay?
Perfect. And well, going back to the idea of science of learning, how would you define this area? What does it care about? What matters for the science of
I
learning?
mean, you told me you were going to ask me a question about
Yeah.
near this. That I'm a cognitive and an educational psychologist.
Yes.
The science of knowledge makes use of both of them. Cognitive psychologists investigate how people perceive the world, how they store and retrieve information, how they solve problems, how they make decisions. Educational psychology, on the other hand, takes those insights gained from cognitive psychology and then applies them to how learners learn and how we can best teach. Educational
Perfect.
psychologists ask questions like, how can we design instruction that aligns with what we know about working memory? What teaching and learning strategies learn to lead to real learning and not only to good scores on an assessment? What kinds of feedback are the most effective in promoting learning? In essence, cognitive psychology provides the theoretical tools for
Yes.
understanding how the mind works, while educational psychology uses those tools to address, practical questions. And if we
Perfect.
add to that, there are, within the science of learning, whatever that might be, we have neurocognition, we have artificial intelligence, we have all of these fields that are also adding to how we look at people, how people learn, study, how their
Perfect.
mind functions and works. So the science of learning is the science, on the one hand, of what learning is, how we learn,
Yeah.
and the second is how we should teach according to how we learn.
Excellent. And you wrote a book about that with Carl Hendrick. I actually have the book here. So,
Yeah.
How Learning Happens. And it's a great book because you look at seminal works in educational psychology and what they mean in practice. So, can you tell us, Paul, what are some of the most important findings that we can discuss,
Yeah.
coming from this area?
Do we have a semester?
Well, yeah, I'm sure you would take a lot longer, teaching your students that. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, the most important things
Yeah.
that we know is how our cognitive architecture works.
Yes.
Um, I mean, years and years and years ago, when I'm talking centuries, not too many centuries ago,
Yeah.
we had no idea how our skeletal system, how our digestive system, how our neurosystems,
Yeah.
whatever that's called, nervous systems,
Yeah.
worked. We had these strange thoughts and ideas about it, about humors and Lord knows what. And we eventually learned how our body functions. Until the 1950s, 1960s, we had no idea how the mind functions, how our cognitive architecture worked. That we had a sensory memory, a short-term, and then it became working memory, and that we had a long-term memory, and what happens in those areas, and how you deal with that. So I think maybe the most important thing is that we've understood how our cognitive architecture works,
Yes.
so we can look at learning in the same way as a doctor can look at how our digestive system works.
Perfect.
And can then say, like what you can best eat, how you can do it, what if there's a problem in your digestion. Before that, we couldn't do that. It was a black box. It was,
Indeed.
like based upon behavioral theories, going back to Edward Thorndike, and then after that,
B.F. Skinner as well.
Skinner,
Yeah.
right, exactly. But it was completely a black box, like something went in, something came out, but what happened there, we had no idea. So I would say the most important is that we've begun to understand that how we process
Yes.
information, and all learning is based upon how we process information. And I could say, well, and then you have, of course, cognitive load theory, and we
Yes.
have information processing theories and things like that. But I think the most important is that we've come to learn and understand how our mind, our brains work.
Excellent. And what would you say? So, what are the main steps for something, information to actually become long-term memory? What needs to happen?
It's very simple. First, it has to be, I have to think of the word in English. You have to select it.
Yes.
Yeah. We get, I think the last estimate I came across was 12 million bits of information per second.
Wow.
Comes in to our five senses. So the first thing is selection, that it's salient. If I give a lecture, I always explain this to people in the sense of, you're now listening to me, but if I stop talking and you listen, you'll hear in the background the air conditioning system.
Yeah.
And you didn't hear that. I mean, you heard it, but you didn't select it. You didn't listen to it. So you weren't deaf, but you didn't. So it came in, but you didn't select it. So the first thing is, selecting of information.
And that has to do with attention, right? Our attentional system.
Also with attention, yes. What you attend to.
Yeah.
Rich Mayer calls that selective selection. The second thing is how you process it in your working memory, what you do with it. So that's the second step. And realizing that your working memory, the word says it, that's where the information processing happens.
Yeah.
That's very short in time and very small in size.
Exactly.
We can only deal with 4, 5, 6 different new pieces of information at one time, and we process it. And when we process it, and make sense of it, we put it in our long-term memory in the schemas or schemata that we already have in our head. If we don't have that, we build new schemas based upon the information that's coming in, and we make use of that in our working memory when we need it again. There's a
Exactly.
cycle between working memory and long-term memory. We encode information in our long-term memory, and we make use of it in our working memory. So you get this cycle of things, and the more often and the more different ways that you move it from your working memory to your long-term memory and back from your long-term memory to your working memory, you increase the strength of the storage
Yeah.
of the information, and you increase the retrieval strength, which means it comes back more quickly. So it makes it
Perfect.
possible when solving a problem in math to immediately recall a formula, but even taking it even simpler, that 8 times 7 is 56, so that while solving the math problem in your working memory, you also don't have to multiply those things,
Yeah.
8 and 7, because that takes up a lot of space. What you do is you get that chunk of information from your long-term memory, 56, and you make use of it. Now, that saves working memory space and information processing, and that makes it more effective and more efficient. So that's kind
Excellent.
of like the loop that's happening.
Perfect. And as Carl Hendrick put it, our working memory doesn't work as well as we would think because it's limited in space and time.
Yeah.
And that means that there are certain ways or certain approaches or methods we can use to help, design instructional guidelines and curricula so that our students
Yeah.
can learn more effectively, right? And am I correct to assume that direct instruction has a lot to do with that?
Direct instruction is a word I never use.
Okay.
Oh, no, actually, it's two words.
Okay.
I speak of explicit instruction.
Okay. Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
What you do is you make use of explicit instruction. You can see it as the 10 or the 17 principles from Baruch Rosenstein, you know.
Yes.
But that's also based upon a lot of other things. I mean, he begins with daily review. Now, David Ausubel said in 1963, determine what the learner knows and teach accordingly.
Yeah. Prior
So you do
knowledge
that,
then.
yeah,
Yes.
prior knowledge.
Yeah.
So, like there aren't just principles that are pulled out of thin air. The principles that of explicit instruction are based upon teacher efficacy studies, cognitive science, and empirical research on learning.
Yeah.
So, if you look at those 10 principles and you say, okay, they're not a checklist, they're not a list of things that I have to do at every lesson, but they're principles that guide how we learn and how we teach. If you make use of them, then you do things that, like lead to better learning. And just the second step, teach things in small steps. And of course, going back to what Archibald said, determine what the learner knows and teach accordingly. What's a small step for me might be a large step for you, and the other way around, depending upon how much we know. But that whole idea of putting it into smaller steps is based upon cognitive load theory and
Yes.
on the size of our working memory. Because we can't deal with 17 pieces of information at the same time. So if we go through each of those, and I'm not going to do it, there are 10 principles, and it would take a whole hour or two to do this.
Yes.
But if you go through them, all of them are based upon research into what works in education, empirical research, and good cognitive psychological theories. And they give us information as to how we can teach most effectively, efficiently, and in the most satisfying way, so that
Yes.
learners learn in an effective, efficient, and satisfying way.
Exactly.
Okay?
Yes, perfect. And the funny thing, the paradox I'd say is that what we think works best for learning is usually wrong. It's very counterintuitive in a way. So
Often,
what
It's often counterintuitive.
Exactly. So when you ask teachers and even students how they study so that they can learn best, they usually tell you things that are not very effective, right?
I mean, you're taught by your parents and your teachers, read it, reread it again. And we
Yes.
know that
Yeah.
doesn't work. Yeah.
Exactly.
You're taught how to highlight things,
Yeah.
or you do that. But we know that there's no direct line between my highlighter and my brain. Just by making something
Yeah.
green doesn't have me learn it. And we know that other things do work. And we should make use of those things that do work. And those are often counterintuitive or even paradoxical. I mean, most
Exactly.
teachers think that the most important thing that they can do, that their job is to make learning as easy as possible. But we know from things like desirable difficulties, as Robert and Elizabeth Bjork say,
Yeah.
make it more difficult, but in a good way. It's harder to try to retrieve it from your long-term memory than reading it a second time. But retrieving it from your long-term memory uh, makes you remember it better and longer than
Yes.
reading it a second time, because the second time you look at it and you say, "Oh yeah, that looks familiar.
Yeah.
Yeah, I read that before." But that
It
doesn't mean you
doesn't
learned
mean
it.
you
You
learned it.
recognize
Yes.
it.
Exactly.
Okay?
Yeah. And it's true. I actually had the pleasure of talking to Robert and Elizabeth Bjork, and I think one of the most important things that really stood out from our conversation is that performance and learning are not the same thing. And
No.
what often leads to very good or better performance does not lead to long-term learning. So
Yeah.
you can
Exactly.
be
Well, I would
exposed to
say
something. Yeah.
without trying to be commercial,
Yeah.
in Europe on the 26th of August and
Yeah.
in the United States on the 12th of September, my new book called Instructional Illusions
Yes. Excellent.
will hit the stands. You can pre-order it now.
Wonderful.
And well, and I don't know if this podcast will be done before it hits the market or
It
after. So
will definitely.
we'll see
Yes.
that. But
Yeah.
that really doesn't matter. But we discuss a number of these, not myths, but illusions. Yeah,
Yes.
it's an illusion that because I'm different from you, I should teach you in a different way.
Yeah.
No, my digestive system works the same as yours,
That's
and my
true.
skeletal system works the same as yours, and my cognitive architecture works the same as yours. The only difference is um, I'm 1 meter 67, you're maybe 2 meters 10.
Yeah.
Our digestive systems work in the same way, but you need more food to function than I do. So we
Perfect.
are all different, but we're all exactly the same.
Yes.
What was it?
Physiologically speaking, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it was. I don't remember if it was Dylan William or Dan Willingham. Dylan William, I thought it was, who
Yeah.
said, "We're all different, but what makes teaching, what's challenging in teaching is that we're all different, but what makes it easy is we're all the same." I'm
Yes.
paraphrasing.
Yeah.
And that's the situation. So that illusion is discussed, but also the illusion that how I perform on an exam says something about what I've learned.
Yeah.
We discuss 10 different illusions in that book. It's a short book. It's maybe 110, 120 pages, not
Excellent.
like how learning happens or how teaching happens. And it's written to kind of like lift the curtain
Yeah.
behind the illusion.
Wonderful. And I'm looking forward to reading the book. I actually talked to Carl Hendrick a couple of weeks ago, and
Yeah,
he talked about the illusion of engagement, which
yeah.
was very clear. And I want to ask you about the illusion of constructivism, because
I won't call that an illusion of an
yeah,
illusion. Constructivism is a philosophy,
yes,
and it's a philosophy you can't prove or disprove. That's number one.
yeah,
But number two, it's it's true. It works. I mean,
yeah,
who I look at the world is different from how everyone else, because that's based upon what I know and what I've learned, and I construct my own reality.
Yeah.
And I mean, uh, that's just the case. But constructivism isn't a pedagogy;
Yes.
it's a philosophy, and it's not a basis for how you can and should teach. So I wouldn't call it an illusion. I think it's people don't really understand it
Yeah.
and have for many different reasons, without going into them at this moment, for many different reasons, um, have um, adopted it as a way of
Pedagogy. Yeah.
instruction. As in America, you call it a pedagogy.
Yeah.
In the Netherlands or in France, you call it a didactique,
Yes.
didactic, but that's not the case in the United States. Um, but it isn't, and we've discussed that in our books, How Learning Happens and How Teaching Happens. We don't go into it in the illusion because it's not an illusion.
Yeah.
It's a misconception. It's a misconception that it's just like the misconception that the way a scientist does science is the way to teach students science. Yeah, Derek Hodgson
Precisely. Yeah.
wrote in the 60s, 1960s and 70s. You have to remember that a scientist does science and a learner learns science. And those are two completely different things. An expert is not just a big novice, and a novice is not just an expert that knows less. They see the
Exactly.
world and experience the world differently. So you could call it just a misconception or a misappropriation, just like the idea of let's teach kids science by having them do science. It's a misconception to think that constructivism is a pedagogy while it's a philosophy.
Yes, but and why is that, Paul? I mean, we can go back to the idea of long-term memory and prior knowledge and cognitive overload, perhaps. So if
Yeah.
you have a bunch of kids or teenagers trying to construct their view of the world by hands-on education, doing things together, but not receiving explicit teaching, instruction, that's not going to work very effectively because they don't have that prior knowledge
No, they don't
yeah,
have it. I mean,
yeah,
how long did it take us to between air quotes
yeah,
discover gravity?
yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
And it's not the work of one single person. I mean,
no, it
of course there
isn't.
are certain people, but it takes time, takes centuries. Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing that sets us apart, that David Geary and John Sweller talk about it, the
Yeah.
thing that sets us apart as species, as that we're capable of communicating this. Yeah, I'm capable of borrowing from other people before me what they've learned and discovered.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that sets us apart as a species, and that's why we're so evolved as we are, because we can do that. We have the tools to do that. Not only the brains, but language, writing, all of those types of
Yes.
things.
Yeah.
We can borrow things for others, so it's a lot more effective and efficient, and actually a lot more satisfying to learn it from someone else and then apply it in a good way than to. I mean, I remember when I was doing physics experiments trying
Yeah.
to determine what the acceleration of a ball was from 3 meters high or something like that,
Yeah.
with tickers and carbon paper and those types of things, and not getting within 20% of 9.8 meters per second squared,
Yeah.
and how that felt like I was failing. I mean, wouldn't it have been just easier to do that and then let me play with something that's falling in a vacuum and something that's falling in air
Yes.
and see how they fall differently? And that in a vacuum that they fall at the exact same rate, that I'm borrowing information from others and then using it in a way that might be fairly satisfying. And it's much more effective, efficient, and enjoyable than doing it by myself.
And you were talking about learning from someone else. I
Yeah,
just remembered a quote by Carl Sagan, who in a way inspired the learning Cosmos. After all, he was the
yeah,
host of
yeah,
Cosmos back in the
yeah,
80s, and he
yeah,
said, "What a wonderful thing a book is. We can talk to someone who's been dead for centuries and get into their minds and learn from
yeah,
them."
exactly.
Yeah, and that's
So
a
why do I
beautiful
want to have
quote. Yeah,
someone discover that? Why do I want to have someone discover that
yeah,
for themselves? If I can do
exactly.
that and say, now, how can we bring it further? I mean, going back to my first answer to you
Yeah,
about science, that's about bringing us further. So
yes,
let's not go back in time. Let's go forward in time and learn from others and make use of what we've learned from others
yes,
and maybe question what we've learned from others and
precisely.
disprove what we thought we had learned from others. But let's not be bad scientists and bad researchers and try to discover it for ourselves and discover that we're bad scientists and bad researchers, but
Yes,
not discover how the world works.
that is so true. And uh, can I ask you, why is it that explicit teaching or explicit instruction gets such a bad reputation? Because is it because we don't understand how it actually works? Because a lot
Yeah.
of teachers nowadays, to give you a little more context, a lot of teachers are against the idea of teacher-centered approaches, let's say, where the teacher is, the beam of knowledge
Yeah.
and is doing all the talking. But that's not exactly how explicit teaching works, right, Paul?
No, no. Well,
Yeah,
there are a couple of things to unpack. First, Brophy
yeah,
and Good discuss this. And if you look at their work, what they're actually saying is that teacher-led instruction is the most student-centered that you can possibly become.
yeah,
Yeah, because as a good teacher, you're adapting and adopting it for your learners. Yeah, but it gets a bad rap because number one, people don't understand it. They think explicit instruction is standing and lecturing for 45 minutes, or they don't understand it and they think they're giving me a checklist of things that I have to do, and they're taking away from my freedom as a teacher. Um, it's been made into some type of straw man
yeah.
that can be easily knocked down. And so there are quite a number of reasons, but nobody would say that a doctor, you're taking away a doctor's um, uh, worth
Yes.
by having that person follow certain procedures when operating, you know? But
Yes.
you don't, while you're operating, you don't use all of the procedures because you're operating on someone's nose and not on their heart. So certain, and that's also the case with the idea behind explicit instruction. They're just principles that tell you if you do this to the right student in the right situation in the right way, you'll have an increased chance of it being successful. A
Yes.
lot better than if you do things that have been shown not to work.
Yeah.
That's
Precisely.
explicit instruction. But if you don't understand that, if you think it's a checklist of things I have to do every lesson, you're not going to really like the idea of explicit instruction. If you
Yeah.
think it's standing there for 45 minutes and lecturing, and that it's not interactive, it's not asking questions, it's not allowing students to do things on their own under
Yeah.
guidance or without guidance. That's all within explicit instruction, but people haven't learned it or don't
Yeah.
know it or
Yeah.
didn't read it well or lethally mutated into something else. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
if I knew that there was one reason, maybe I could solve the problem and have people make use of it. But I think there are a lot of reasons. There's also philosophical things
Definitely.
of behind it, from this gut feeling that if I um, discover it myself,
Yeah.
I'll remember it better. That's usually not the case. And then people come with an anecdote, and I say, yeah, but that's one learning experience in the millions that you've had. You remembered that one. But the
True.
999,999 other learning experiences in which you were taught things, apparently that's not salient to you. And that's why I often say you have a second anecdote. I'll use it as data. I'll then call it data.
Exactly.
Um, that's, yeah, it would be nice if I could solve the problem. The only thing I
Yeah.
can do is get on my pulpit and explain it to people and talk to
Yeah.
them and write books and write blogs and
Yes.
and give podcasts so that
Exactly.
people maybe eventually understand what's going on.
And speaking of helping people understand that, you mentioned your blog, and I wanted to ask you a little bit about the blog because I've read many of your blog posts. They're excellent. I think they're
Thank you.
really, yeah, and especially, so you talk a lot about explicit teaching. I remember reading a very interesting blog post you wrote about what desirable difficulties are and what they are not,
Yeah,
which
I wrote that
was
with my colleague Miriam Nayland. Yeah,
exactly. And can you tell us about your blog? So how
I
often
have a
do you
number of
post?
them.
Yeah.
I have one
Yeah.
in on my own site.
Yeah.
It's kirschnered.nl, and the other with Miriam Nayland, which is three-star learning experiences.
Perfect.
I mean, at a certain point in time, I thought it was necessary to spread the knowledge in a way that people can possibly understand it well. And it's
Yes.
not because people are stupid, but it's because that's my area of expertise and not yours. Teachers also aren't taught very much cognitive psychology.
Yeah, very
If you
true.
look at the curricula, there isn't much in it. They weren't taught to work and think as scientists. They didn't learn the cognitive psychology. They didn't learn about dual coding theory. They didn't learn about elaboration theory. They didn't learn about desirable. They didn't learn any of these things. So it's kind of like my job now that I'm in, let's say, in the last 8 to 10 years when I was employed, and
Yeah.
now as someone who's no longer employed, I find it my duty
Yeah.
to spread information and
Perfect.
make it available to people, hopefully in the way that they can digest it and make
Certainly.
use of it. And that's what I try to do in my blogs. And one is on called Three-Star Learning Experiences. And people say 3-star, why not 5-star?
Yes.
Because I'm a cook. I used to be a cook. I used to make my living as a cook.
Oh, really?
And for
Huh.
me, the highest thing you can achieve is 3 Michelin
Yeah,
stars.
that's true. Yes.
And what I say is every teacher should be a 3-star Michelin teacher.
Yes.
And that's why it's called 3-star learning experiences.
Excellent. It makes perfect sense. And I think this analogy is interesting because as a chef, you need to understand the techniques and the strategies that work so you can get the plate ready.
Yeah, but you also have
So
to understand your food,
yeah,
the
the
fooding elements,
ingredients and yes,
and know that you can. Um, what will happen to a piece of meat if you boil it as opposed to broil it, as opposed to frying it, as opposed
exactly.
to like what do you say, sautéing it. All of those
Or
kind of things.
grilling or something.
You
Yeah,
have to
exactly. Yeah,
that leads to a different thing that you're eating, and knowing what you can and can't combine, and what works and what doesn't work. I mean,
yeah,
a good cook knows that yeast needs an environment of 37 degrees, whereas baking powder or needs an
yeah,
environment that's a very high temperature because that's a chemical and not a biological
yeah.
reaction, and that
Yes.
baking soda needs a acidic environment in order to have it work. And that's why you use buttermilk in buttermilk pancakes and not regular milk, because you use baking soda in your
Yes.
buttermilk pancakes, and buttermilk is acidic. Now,
Exactly.
that's what a good cook knows, and
Yes.
will never put the yeast in a 70
Yeah.
degrees Celsius environment, but never try to have something rise with baking powder
Yeah.
at 37. They
Exactly.
know it. So it goes down to the finest details, and that's what a teacher should also know. Like
Perfect. Yeah.
otherwise you're just working at a flipping a pancake at International House of Pancakes, and
Yeah.
you're not a cook, you're not a chef.
Perfect. And I think I don't remember who said it, and I'm probably paraphrasing that if you don't understand the science, then your instruction is blind. And what
Now
happens
that's
with
John Sweller
Joe
says
Sweller, right?
don't yeah
Exactly.
yeah
Yeah. Yeah.
without knowledge of our
Cognitive
cognitive
architecture.
architecture,
Yeah.
instruction is blind.
Exactly. And I feel it's the same for a chef, for a cook.
Yeah,
I
of course.
mean, maybe you don't need to know how the science works necessarily, but you have to understand the combinations that work.
Yeah, but
But
it's
that's
really
based on the
important also
science.
to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's basically. I mean, you
Yeah.
don't need to know exactly, but things. But you have to know the science of when cooking an egg. It's not for nothing that is specific. There's a special type of egg called the 67-degree egg,
Yeah.
because at that temperature, exactly that temperature, certain changes occur in the structure of the egg,
Yeah.
so that you can serve it at your meal in a certain way, and you have to understand that. And if you don't, then adding your eggs to something that's already near the boiling point will only
Yeah.
have them coagulate and never have it bind. So you'll end
Perfect.
up with scrambled eggs in your milk instead of a pudding,
Yeah.
which should bind. Like it's those types that you have to. That's the science behind it. And
Exactly.
maybe you don't know exactly how many degrees in temperature the
Yeah.
water temperature boiling point goes down as you go to a higher elevation,
Yeah.
but knowing that water boils at a different temperature on the in the Colorado Rockies
Yeah.
than it does in the Netherlands means you won't boil an egg as long, or you'll have to boil it
Precisely.
longer
Yeah.
at a higher temperature, because there the water boils maybe at 90 degrees instead of 100 degrees.
Yeah.
Yeah? And if you don't know that, your eggs will never get done. Your pasta will never cook.
Yeah.
Yeah. You normally make pasta in 10 minutes, it's al dente. Now,
Yeah.
not in Crested Butte, Colorado.
Yeah. That's so true. And that brings me to the final part of this podcast, because uh, I really like to ask my guests here about their geekiness, let's say, or
Okay.
So, how about you, Paul? So, do you consider yourself a geek, or a person who was into, I don't know, maybe sci-fi, fantasy, or maybe
No, no,
just a
not at all.
nerd? Not at
Not at
all.
all. I'm a
Okay,
nerd.
you're
I
a
looked it up.
nerd. Okay,
You,
good.
you gave me the question. I looked it up. And it says nerds are typically focused on academic pursuits and mastering knowledge, while
Exactly.
geeks are more enthusiastic about specific hobbies and enjoy collecting related items or engaging in discussions. So I guess I'm
Perfect.
a nerd, but
Yes.
in a certain sense, I'm a geek because my hobby is good teaching and good education. And
Perfect.
if a
Yes.
geek is enthusiastic about a specific hobby, then either I'm a geeky nerd or I'm a nerdy geek.
Perfect. Well, I can tell you are a nerd because you are into the science of cooking as well. So I think
Yeah,
that was an interest that you developed, because you really wanted to understand
yeah,
how certain ingredients combine
yeah,
together, the cooking methods and
yeah.
everything. So have you always been interested in the science behind things, why things work a certain way?
Yes and no. And we speak in the Netherlands in Dutch
Yeah.
about being in alpha and beta of a gamma. And alpha
Okay.
is are the humanities, the beta is
Yeah.
the sciences, and gamma is the social sciences like
Aha.
psychology.
Okay.
And I think I've always been into all three. I was always a very good beta. I scored great in physics, chemistry, mathematics, biology, those types of things.
Yeah.
But my wife always tells me but you're so verbal,
Yeah.
and you always want to know the origin of words, and you're language Nazi, and you're
Yeah.
always making use of literary techniques and things like
Yes.
that. Actually, you're very much in the humaniora, as we call it. Yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
and so I'm like a bit of everything. I try not to classify myself,
Yes.
but
Excellent.
yeah,
Yeah. And to wrap up this section so we can move on to the final bit,
okay.
was there anyone who inspired you, perhaps a scientist or a celebrity, or maybe a book you read, a movie, something that really got you into science, let's say?
Um, no,
No. So it was
there are books
yeah.
that influenced me.
Yeah.
Um, there's an illusionist. There was an illusionist.
Yeah.
He died recently. James James Randi,
Oh,
who was
yes,
known as
James Randi.
the amazing Randy,
Oh, I
and
remember.
he
He
was
used to
most of
expose people,
yeah
pseudoscientists, and yeah,
most
yeah,
of his life he was
yeah,
an illusionist,
yeah,
and then he began a crusade against uh, paragnostics, paranormals, and
yeah.
things like that.
The
And
supernatural and things like
yeah,
that. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
And he wrote books like The Flim Flam Man, and
yeah.
he taught you to look, or me, behind the curtain of
Yes,
the illusion that I'm possibly seeing, and that I shouldn't believe my eyes or my ears or my nose or my any other sense that I have, because I might be being fooled. And he
yes,
wrote a number of books. His most famous, I think, is called The Flim Flam Man.
yes. I think so. Yeah.
But his books inspired me, yeah, to
Would
look
you say they
behind the
inspired
curtain.
the title of your new book? Maybe somehow,
Now,
not directly.
he's not directly,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
he's cited in the book at the
Ah,
beginning.
okay.
Yeah,
Excellent. Yeah,
so he's in it. And a second type of book that I read, and maybe you'd call it science fiction,
yeah.
but I call it more literary cynicism, is
Yes.
the works of Kurt Vonnegut.
Oh, yes. Excellent.
Yeah. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah.
So
So I
those are
definitely,
those things, but I'm not. I don't go to sci-fi films. Yeah,
yeah,
I mean, if I read sci-fi, it was more philosophical sci-fi,
yeah.
like Dune or
Oh,
Stranger in a
yes.
Strange Land, those
Excellent.
types of things. I never go to sci-fi films. I haven't seen one of the Star Wars. I haven't seen any.
Aha.
I never watched Star Trek.
Okay.
Um, those
Yes.
I'm definitely not that type of geek.
Okay. Perfect. Wonderful. And well, Paul, so
Sheldon, I'm not a Sheldon.
okay, you're not a Sheldon. Perfect. Well,
Uh,
I think Sheldon was both, to be very honest. The
yeah, yeah,
academic side was very
yeah,
prominent as well. So he
yeah,
was a nerd for
yeah,
sure, and
exactly.
also a
He's a nerd for
geek.
sure. But I don't have his geekiness. No,
Yeah, definitely,
I
definitely.
have his nerdiness.
Yes, perfect. And well, let's. I think we can put two questions together so we can talk
Go
about
ahead.
final tips for teachers. What is something that people usually get wrong about cognitive psychology? That or I know we've discussed many things here that
Well,
learning.
one of the things is
Yeah.
that you can directly translate research into practice.
Yes. There you go.
Yeah?
Yes.
But one of the things that they get wrong about something from cognitive science, which is cognitive load theory, is that it's
Yes.
the goal of the teacher to minimize effort, that the teacher should make
Mm.
things as easy as possible.
Yeah.
But that's not the case. The
Yeah.
goal of cognitive load theory, of making use of it, is to optimize the
Not
load and
minimize
not to
necessarily.
minimize the
Yes.
load. So
Yeah.
those are the types of things that people get wrong. But that's what we wrote about it in one of our books. That's just a lethal mutation of it. People don't understand it, and it mutates into something else, just like dual coding theory from Alan Pavio has
Yes.
partially mutated into learning styles.
Yes. Perfectly. Yeah.
Yeah,
So basically, if you don't understand the science well enough, you might give rise to neuromyths, you know?
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it was just a. If I open up my
Yeah.
even let me look at it. This. If I open up my WhatsApp, I was just discussing that with a
Yeah.
colleague of mine this morning. There's a um, an article,
Yeah.
and let me see, is this it? Oh yeah, here it is.
Uh-huh. Okay.
It's called the name of the article is
Yeah.
Learning More Than You Can Know. Introductory education produces overly expansive self-assessments of knowledge. Now, that's
Ah.
just a very, um, um, let's
Yeah.
say, difficult way of saying um, an introductory course can give you too much confidence.
Aha.
Knowing a little is very
Yes.
dangerous.
Yes.
Yeah?
Very, very
That's why I
true.
say teachers should really understand cognitive science because knowing a little causes them to mutate things. If you understand deeply how dual coding theory works and
Yeah.
why, you're not going to make it into learning styles. If you
Exactly.
don't understand it and you look at it and says, oh, pictorial, verbal, those are two learning styles.
Yes.
Yeah? A little bit of knowledge is dangerous.
That is so true. And Paul, so the last question I have really,
Yeah.
and you're doing this already. You, Carl Hendrick, a lot of people I follow, many guests I had on this podcast, like Paul Howard Jones, my former professor, Nidhi Sachdeva,
Yeah.
Jared Cooney Horvath. I've had the
Yeah.
honor of interviewing John Sweller, Robert Bjork, Henry Roediger III as well, And I think all
Yeah.
of them, to a certain extent, have done it, are doing it. So how important is it to make science accessible to teachers, and what can we do? I mean, this podcast is an
This
attempt.
podcast,
Yeah.
going back, how important is it? It's very important, but we have to realize that a little knowledge can be a dangerous thing.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
but it's very important. I mean, you often don't need it in every. I don't have to understand how the engine of my car works in
Yes.
order to drive it. But if I want to do anything with it, if I want to be a mechanic, then I have to really understand it. Now, teachers are the mechanics of learning. And if you
Yes.
don't understand how we learn, then it makes it very, very hard to tune that engine. Yeah.
That's perfect.
And
Yeah.
yeah, I like to work in analogies, but it, it's it's really important. But it's also really important to sometimes build nuance into it and say, okay, this is what we know at this moment, but who knows what we'll know in 10 years. Yeah.
Excellent.
So learn as much as you can so that maybe you're the person who has disproved it and come up with something great in 10 years. And you could be a scientist, but you could also be a teacher.
Yes, exactly. Well, Paul Kirschner, thank you very much. It was really an honor, and I'm sure a lot of people will benefit from listening to our conversation. So,
I
again,
hope so.
yeah,
You
thank
put me in
you.
a list of incredibly um, important and profound people with the Bjorks and John Sweller and things like that.
Uh,
So I hope I lived up a little bit to your
oh, yes,
expectations.
most definitely. So again, thank you. We're very thankful for your contributions as well. And please make sure you follow Paul Kirshner's blogs and buy his books, because a little knowledge can be dangerous, but if you actually delve into what he's exposing and writing about in his books, I'm sure you're going to benefit a lot. So thank you again, Paul.
You're very, very welcome, Andre.